If you could begin, gentlemen, by telling each one of you your name, rank, and so forth, where you served, what war, and so forth. Mr. Brandt.
My name's Don Brandt, and I was a Lieutenant JG in the U.S. Naval Air Corps in the South Pacific, is where I served.
I was Paul Schneeberger. I am now. I served in Europe in World War II, 14 months in combat.
I'm Richard Donahue, and I was in the U.S. Army Air Force, flying Martin B-26 in Europe.
Okay. Could you talk a little bit about why all the three of you are interviewing together today?
We all graduated from Hughes High School in 1941.
And he and I graduated from the same grade school,
Which was?
Clifton School in Clifton.
Okay. Did all of you enter the service at about the same time? What were the circumstances for each of you?
I enlisted in June of 42, or April of 42.
Well, I was drafted. I didn't want to go even. But I had to work after I got out of high school for a year before I could go to college. And then I did go to college. In 6 months, I was drafted.
I enlisted. I was at the University of Cincinnati studying engineering, and they changed the deferments, so I enlisted in the Army Air Force Reserve in October '42, and was called to active duty in January of '43.
Okay. Would you have something that you would like to share together as a group about your experiences, or anything that we want to get in this joint session together?
Yeah, I can tell you something.
Okay.
I think it's an extremely unusual situation that the three of us all knew each other in high school. We all went into the service pretty much at the same time. Each of us was in different branches, and we each saw a whole bunch of combat. It's probably by the grace of God that the three of us are here today.
That's for sure.
When you're in combat, you think you have a little bit of good luck, and you're using it up all the time. And here we come home, we married gals we knew in high school, we're still married to them, and to show you that you don't use all your luck up, this guy won $5 million in my high lottery.
And the next week at the Hughes alumni, he won the door prize.
Well, that proves how lucky I was in the service.
How about you, Mr. Brandt? Is there a particular reason that you wanted to do this with your friends?
Well, they forced me into it. I mean, no, I just thought it's sort of unusual that all three of us had similar experiences, and you know, I just wanted to do it with them.
There is something that all three of us were exposed to, and we talked about it at lunch, actually. The time when we were young, 19, 20, was Depression, or right after the Depression. All of us had to work very hard, not only to get the money to go to college, but to participate in anything at all. Going to the movie, going to a swim was an experience, a special experience. So this certainly was part of our motivation in the service and after the service.
While you were all in the service, were you able to communicate with each other?
No.
Not at all, and not until you got home.
That's right.
Okay.
No, that was the worst thing in the service, communications.
We actually got together to some of our high school reunions. That's where we start seeing each other every 5 years. We had reunions, and we were quite active in it. So that's where we got together.
Now, all three of you married after your time in the service?
I did. He's married
You
before.
married before.
I got married before I went in the service because I was old-fashioned enough to write to my intended father-in-law to ask permission to marry Marilyn. And when I found out I was in a machine gun section, I decided I better get married before I go overseas.
I did the same thing. I married a gal. In fact, she was in our graduating class. And we went to grade school together, started dating in high school, and then when I was in flight training down in Brady, Texas, we got married then. And Charlotte traveled around the country with me to the various air bases until I went overseas.
What was life like for your wives while you were in the service?
That was really interesting. When we would move from one base to another, you have to understand, excuse me, what the attitude was like down there. We were in a world war, which we weren't sure we were going to win. And we would move from one base to the other, and the gals would spend the first night in a hotel, and then they'd go down to the residential streets and knock on doors, ask them to rent rooms. And the people were really great. They took them in, and not only took them in, but they were very good to all the service people. So the attitude was wonderful.
Was it something where, I know there was coming out of a time of rationing and so forth, were things still very tight because of the war effort, of course. Did they have to do without a lot?
Oh, everybody did without a lot, but they made do. They had a statement, the difficult we do immediately, the impossible takes a little longer.
Mr. Schneeberger, how about things with your wife?
Well, of course, the circumstances were such that we got married. We went to Trenton, New Jersey for a honeymoon, and that was it. I went overseas at that point, anticipating I didn't know what. It was an interesting trip across the ocean, my first trip across the Atlantic. Our convoy, which was 80 ships, was twice attacked by German subs apparently, because right around us the depth charges were being dropped, and it rattles the ship a little bit.
About how many people were on a ship?
The ship I went over on was the Marine Wolf, and it was had 3,000 troops on board.
And you were all ended up at the same destination, or did you drop off people at different ports?
No, we wound up overnight in Weymouth Harbor, England, and the next morning we went across the channel and landed at Cherbourg. But Cherbourg had been beaten up by then, and we had to leave ship by lighters to get ashore, and then we went to a French field and pitched pup tents and slept in some mud.
I want to return to Mr. Brandt.
Oh, it did say the army lived higher than the hog.
Listen who's talking.
Yeah.
You were in the U.S. Naval Air Corps, served in the South Pacific. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiencing coming into the service and so forth?
Coming into it, a youngster, I saw a movie, Robert Taylor, I think they called him Pensacola, and ever since I saw that movie, I wanted to be in the Naval Air Corps, and enlisted in 42, as I said. I was 18, and just went through all the training and became a naval aviator. Enjoyed every minute of it.
What was the best part?
Tell them the planes you flew in to start with.
Well, I started actually. There was no room for us in the service, so there was a field, a little putt-putt field in Cincinnati, Watson Airport, and they sent a group of us out there to learn how to fly Piper Cubs. And as soon as we finished with that, by January '43, we went into regular service, and then from then on it was training and get your wings to go overseas.
So from the time that you started training until you were considered a pilot, how long of a time period are we talking?
I started in pre-flight in January of '43. In January '44, I was overseas.
Did you specialize in your aircraft? The training was broken down into your specialized
I was a
aircraft?
fighter pilot, and yeah, well, you had everybody in the naval if you were going to be a shipboard, why you had to learn how to land on a carrier. And after you get your wings, you go to what they call operational training. and that's where you fly fleet planes. And that's the first time you don't have an instructor behind you. You read a manual and you jump in because there's only one place. And then you learn how to land field carry laners, and we went up on the Great Lakes. There was a carrier, a little bitty thing called the Wolverine, made 4 carrier landings and then immediately went overseas.
Okay. When you went overseas, where were you originally based? Overseas?
Well, we went to, we were actually replacement pilots, and several of us went to a place called Hilo, Hawaii, and we joined Air Group 2. Some of their fighter pilots were sent over out on the Enterprise. They were replacement pilots out there. So by the time they were stationed there, there was no room in the squadron for us, and so about 10 of us, about 20 pilots, and they chose 10 of us, and we went aboard the USS Hornet in March of '44. We trained with them about 2 months.
What was a typical day like for you once you got overseas?
Harrowing. No. When you get overseas, well, the first thing is there were 20 of us and they chose 10 of us, so that first is getting chosen to be part of the air group. And then immediately, I guess 2 months later, we were aboard the Hornet heading for combat. So from then on, we served about 7-8 months aboard the Hornet in combat.
And do you know about how many missions you flew? Or?
I flew 25. I should have flown close to 40, but I was shot down at Guam, and I spent about over a month on a submarine, so I missed some of the better missions.
And you were the person that was rescued out of the ocean with the submarine?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Would you like to tell me? You don't have to.
It doesn't make any difference. I take my hat off to all the guys aboard the submarine, but we were, they didn't have helicopters, and there was no way to pick me up. The submarines were called lifeguard duty, and you'd get shot down and they'd pick you up and you'd stay aboard the sub until they finished their tour of duty and you got off. But more and more we were getting shot down closer to land, and the submarine couldn't surface. So they briefed us in the ready room about the guy coming along with a periscope, and you just hang on and pull you out. Boy, no way, man. But the next day, honest to feet, the next day, there was a periscope coming across the horizon, and I missed it 3 times, but the 4th time I got hold of it and they pulled me out, and I spent about almost a little over a month on the submarine. Strange thing is, Hughes High School, one of the guys aboard the submarine went to Hughes High School. So we became friends, and Elmer Babby, you remember him, and he passed away just last year.
So how long were you in the ocean before your pickup?
Oh, I was about 6.5 hours in the water, yeah.
Were these areas that we think of as warm when we think of the South
Well, it
Pacific?
was warm, all right, yeah. But the strange thing is well, when I came down in the parachute, they had the straps on wrong, and I came down sideways and broke all my ribs, and had to cut myself out of it, so I didn't have a raft. And we go to reunions right now, and one of the fellows going to reunion, a dive bomber pilot, came down and dropped me a raft. So that's what saved my life.
Was this shark-infested waters, or?
I didn't think so, but got aboard the sub, and the natives of Guam are called Chamorro Indians, and one of the stewards mates was Chamorro, and he came up to me and said, "Did you see any sharks?" And I said, "No, I didn't see any." He said, "Boy, it's infested with them." Thanks a lot. Yeah, I didn't see any.
So you said this was near Guam.
Right.
You were headed for Japan, or?
No, this was we were just fighting battles around. We were at the
Okay.
Marianas at that time, and then the Philippines. We were hitting the Philippines and the Marianas.
Okay.
The second time out, we were heading for Japan.
And then it took you said quite a while until you were on the submarine for quite a period of time, and then did you return home, or did you rejoin
Well, they wanted
the
us to
group?
go back to Pearl Harbor, but another fellow and I, he was with my same squadron, he was shot down the day before me. We decided to come back to the Hornet. You talk about an experience, like, what do they call it, preacher boy, what do they call it when they fire a line?
Preacher's boy.
Yeah, between the thing, and you get in a sack between two ships, and then you get off the side, and then they pull you into the next one. And that's the worst.
That's a ride.
5 times we did that to get back. And I tell you what, I wanted a battle star for that.
Now, what happened afterwards when you got back to the Hornet?
Well, next day we were flying again, and the fellow was shot down. He and I flew together the rest of the tour.
So you were able to finish out your
Yeah, tour duty until I think it was September, October we got off.
Okay. What else would you like for the public to know about your time in the service or those of others that you served with?
Pay service was low, right? We didn't get enough money. No, we were played fine. Well, we reformed. What we did was regrouped, and about half of us stayed with it, and we went overseas the second time. And this time as fighter bombers. Lived on Saipan for about a month and a half, and a strange thing, we could see Tinian where all the 29s were taken off, and I still think one of them we saw was the Enola Gay, and while we were there the war was over, although we did get to Japan about 2 weeks afterwards.
And then one of the things that you flew were B-26?
No, I flew fighter planes.
Fighter planes.
Yeah, I flew F-6F and F-4Us.
Okay. Was there a lot of, I'm thinking maybe as a young person that's hearing this, can you describe what it was like in this type of an aircraft? I know they're probably envisioning a modern jet. This is a far cry from that.
No, they were, very, very good airplanes. I mean, they were great. It's the same engines that you flew with your 26. And they were great planes, and I guess they were the top of the class when we were flying, and I enjoyed them.
How about
stayed
the
in the
maneuverability?
please?
Good maneuverability?
Oh yeah. Well, not as maneuverable as Zero, but no, they were great. We had better tactics than they had, better training. I think after Midway they lost most of their best pilots, although they still had some pilots, but most of them were lost at Midway.
What do you think the role of the fighter, can you kind of give an overview with World War II and the role of the fighter pilot?
Well, our role was to protect the dive bombers and the torpedo pilots. We'd go in on a strike. That was our thing, to stay above them. We'd go in and strafe first and then come right back up and then fly, intercept any Jap planes that were coming in.
And what kind of altitude are we talking?
Well, we'd come in somewhere around 18,000 feet and then go on down and strike, and then coming out any way you got out of there, as low as you could and fast as you could. And then we'd regroup bring them back.
So how many planes would you be flying with at a time?
Well, you had a whole fleet out there, so several hundred. Each carrier had over 100 planes on it, and so you had all this tremendous fleet. There was no way, navigation, you went out one way and turned 180 degrees, come back, you hit some part of the fleet. It was so big. Tremendous.
How much time was between missions normally?
How much time?
How much lag time would you have?
Usually we'd fly every day, just one mission a day. Sometimes two, but most of the time just one.
Okay. Is there something that I've overlooked that we need to mention? I want to make
No.
sure and get
That's fine.
everything that,
Thank you.
okay. Did you need to, I know that you were on a time deadline, did you need to leave at a particular time?
If you're finished with me,
Whatever you want to say.
that's fine.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Actually, it was bigger. Seriously, I wasn't that.
I can see why you were cramped.
Okay, anytime you're ready.
Okay, this is the Mae West I used when I was in the water. And these are dye that you break loose and they can find you. It turns into real yellowish green. And I was telling the fellows before, a friend of mine was shot down, and at night, I was always wondering why they had the whistle on here. But the fleet passed him by. He was in the water, and by blowing his whistle, somebody heard him and came back and picked him up. So all this stuff was useful. He had a flashlight on there. And those are the two planes I flew with, F6F Hellcat and the F4U Corsair.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
That'll add a lot to it.
All right.
With a full bomb load. And it's a mess. I don't know how we ever survived it, but we did. And I've got, a dozen shots or so in there.
Okay.
So I think I'll get that book and bring it over here.
This one?
Yeah.
So when you're ready, we'll just reintroduce you again, just to make sure that.
How do you like that?
Oh, aren't those great?
That's my wife and I when we were married.
Wonderful.
They wouldn't have been up there if you weren't down there.
Well,
Do you need a moment to find the ones you're looking
Yeah.
for? Okay.
Here, there. I don't know if you'll be able to see those with the cellophane or not.
Actually, could you hold those
Maybe
up?
you hold it in
I
your
will,
lap.
yeah.
Okay.
and-
I put them when I get to it.
Okay.
Okay. Are you all set?
Let me think about it.
Okay. And if we need,
He's an organized man, that's how he's alive.
You had to be.
and if you need to stop tape, we can do that too.
That'd be great, because there will be some times I'd like to stop and think a bit to
Okay.
organize my thoughts, because
Just tell us
it carried
to,
all the way through.
yes, just tell us to stop and we can do that.
And I have to tell you, some of this might get emotional for me, in which case I'd like for you to stop.
That's
Because,
fine. You just want to give us a signal?
Yeah, I'll raise my thumb up.
Okay,
But some of it's pretty tough.
yes. Are we ready
And
to
it might be interesting, I
start?
can tell you this. These things are so vivid that I can actually close my eyes and take it frame by frame as to what happened. And that's 57 years ago.
It's remarkable, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it really is. Okay, you can go ahead and start.
Okay.
Can you reintroduce yourself for us?
Sure. I'm Richard Donahue. I was a B-26 pilot in the 17th Bomb Group and the 37th Bomb Squadron. And my serial was 0715738. I joined my group as a replacement pilot in Corsica in October of 1944, and we flew combat into northern Italy. And when you join an outfit like that, what they do is put one inexperienced air crewman with an experienced crew. So as a pilot, you fly a number of missions as co-pilot before you get back to your original crew. In my case, a lot of my people were killed, so I never really got to fly very much with the original crew. We had my first experience was not one I was personally involved in, but in October of '44, Frank Jelinek was flying a 26 on a mission up in northern Italy, and they had 4 1,000-pound bombs aboard. And on the way, when they released, only 3 of the bombs come out of the bomb bay, and one of them hung up. And on a bomb, there's 2 eyelets, one in the front, one in the back. And as I understood it, the front solenoid release of the bomb was cocked down, and they weighed 1,000 pounds, and so there was no way they could raise that bomb up. In fact, there's nothing but a center track in the bomb bay, and you can't get back there and work with a chute on because there's not enough room. And you would need a number of men to get back there anyway to try to raise that thing up and get it back on the shackle, which they couldn't do. So when they got back to Corsica, CO told them that they wanted to bail out to do so, and then for Frank to turn the airplane 90 degrees to the runway, which is, we were on the northwest side of Corsica, just south of Bastia, about 5 miles. And our runway was a north-south runway parallel to the beach, perhaps a mile from the beach. And Frank didn't want to jump out, and neither did the rest of the crew, so he landed to the north, and when he did, that bomb came off, and although they had secured it, they put the pins back in so the fuses should not harm themselves, but for some strange reason, that bomb went off right underneath the airplane, and it took the whole. Here's a model of this model I actually built during the time I was in flying combat. But from here back, the entire airplane was stripped. There was no fuselage. Frank lost the brakes; they had no control on it, and the pilot has a big sheet of armor here on this side, and he has an armor plate behind him, and that protected Frank, and he just rolled out on the side on the runway, and unfortunately we lost all the rest of the crew. There was 5 of the men in there. They were all lost.
That was one of your first missions.
That was my first exposure to combat. I hadn't actually flown combat yet. So Frank Jones came back up the squadron area and went into the operations officer, and he told him, he said, I'll never fly another one. And they didn't do anything about it. They just gave him a 5th of whiskey, which he drank most of and went to bed. And Frank never did fly another combat mission, and they didn't do anything about it. They just rotated him home. Back when we moved from Corsica to Dijon, France, Frank flew up with me. He didn't fly as a pilot, he just rode up with me. And on my 7th mission, I had a lot of trouble getting my 7th mission off. I can't remember what happened the first one. I know we got airborne with bomb load, and I was still flying the right seat. And that mission was scrubbed, so when you scrub a mission like that and take off the bomb load, you do not get credit for it. You only get credit for a combat mission when you cross the enemy line and go into combat area. So if you take off the bomb load and for some reason the mission is scrubbed and you come back, it's a non-event so far as the military is concerned. Although we lost a lot of people as a result of it. The first mission was scrubbed. The second mission, I remember very clearly, we took off to the north at Corsica. It was a very windy day, and there was a ridge of mountains to the west of us, and the winds were coming across there very hard, and the turbulence was unbelievable. I've flown all my life, and I've never seen turbulence like that. We were up at about 2,000 feet, and that airplane dropped 1,000 feet. And when it stopped going down, it felt like I jumped out and hit the ground. I mean, it was unbelievably hard. It was so severe that we had some of the airplanes, the bombs were coming off the shackles and going through the bomb bays. So they scrubbed the mission and we landed. So that was my second attempt to get my 7th mission off. On my 3rd attempt, we went to down the line. I was to fly a right seat in the number 4 position, which is the alternate lead. I should explain to you that our missions were all very small. We would go into North Italy or into Germany with it's 3 flights of 6 airplanes, which would be 18 airplanes, up to 24, sometimes 36. Those were the large missions for us. And so quite often we only had 24 airplanes. In flying in Corsica, we did not have fighter escort. And we did not fly what we call chaff element, which I'll cover later. But we went down this, I had a young captain who's an experienced pilot, quite experienced, and little guy. And we went to this airplane and got a gear all in and cranked it up. I should explain, they take you out by truck and drop you off at your airplane. We cranked this machine up and we're checking the mag on it, and one of the mags was bad, so we had an airplane we couldn't fly. But this time everybody else is getting their airplanes started up. Here we got to get a truck over there and get our gear out, go find another airplane which is called an alternate, get into it. We didn't have time to pre-flight it. We climbed into it, cranked it up. The airplane's called the Indian Chief. I have a picture of it here before the accident. The airplane had been funded by Pontiac Division of General Motors. And the employees had bought bonds, U.S. government bonds, to pay for that airplane. And it had over 100 missions on it. As I say, we were number 4 position, which is the alternate lead. So we were taking off to the north at Corsica, and we had about 120 miles an hour, and the left tire blew. Now we had 4 1,000-pound bombs aboard, 1,200 gallons of 100-octane gasoline, and here we have no wheel on the left side. That machine dropped down, and I can still remember pushing on the right rudder as hard as I could, trying to keep it straight down the runway. And we started sliding, and that tire drew us off the runway. And when they constructed that runway, they had gone about 200 foot over and cut the ground down flat. And there's an embankment there, and that embankment must have been 4 or 5 foot high, and I thought, we're going to slide into that embankment. I looked down the runway, and somebody had parked a B-26 perpendicular to us, just off the runway. I thought, good Lord, if we don't hit the embankment, we're going to hit that airplane. Fortunately, about that time, the right gear collapsed, and we slid clear off the runway. I have pictures of it here. The right engine was turned 90 degrees in the nacelle. One of the blades, which weighs about 200 pounds, came out and took the canopy off, which is over my head, and I can get my fist between my head and that canopy. We found the canopy and the blade over on the left side of the airplane. When this was happening, there's dust and dirt's coming up in the cockpit, and I thought, I'm dying. We're not going to survive this. And I thought, I wonder, do you hear the explosion? Because this thing's going to blow up. And I wondered, will I hear it, or am I just dead? It stopped sliding, and it didn't blow up. I thought, oh my Lord, with all that gasoline in those tanks rupturing, now we'll be incinerated. And it didn't burn. And I remember, darn, I should have released my safety belt, opened that canopy and trying to get out. I just forgot all about that. I reached up, and my hands went outside. I can remember getting my hands on the top of the rib to the canopy. And I started out of the airplane, and I felt like I was halfway out of the airplane, and something stopped me with my safety belt. I hadn't released it. I reached down and hit the snap on it. And I was young then, and I jumped, and I put both feet on the seat and jumped up. And when I got up on top of it, 1 foot on that ridge to the leading it, it's this ridge right here, right in through here, because that canopy was gone. And I took 1 jump here, 1 under the canopy, and I was on the ground. 5 other men on that airplane, and they all followed me out. And they all come over to me and afterwards said, we're sure glad you got out of the way. So we're 300-400 foot over here to the northeast or northwest of that airplane, waiting for it to blow up. And it didn't blow up, and it didn't burn. And I want to show you pictures of this thing, because it's a mess. I don't know if you can see this or not, but here's a picture of that engine turned 90 degrees.
Hold it, yeah, straight to the...
Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Can you see where this blade is gone?
Hold it straighter if you can. There you go, straight up. Mm-hmm. There you go.
I've got it so close I can't see.
Mhm.
But there's pictures here of the crew and damage. And if you want, I think there's another set of pictures of this on the next page.
Okay.
Yeah, here's some more pictures of it. Can you see that? You can see how the canopy's going there. You see how the engine is turned in the mounts. They just took that airplane over to the boneyard, used it for parts.
So it never did catch on fire.
It never caught on fire. I should explain to you that the Martin B-26 was considered the hot rod of the Second World War. In fact, it was said that you didn't have to fly it if you didn't want to, but most of us that flew it loved it. But the problem with it is it killed a lot of people, particularly in training. And President Truman was I think a senator, as I recall, and he had the Truman Commission to investigate that airplane because we were losing so many men from training. Originally, it had a 66-foot wingspan. So as a result of their investigation, they went to Glenn L. Martin and told him that they wanted a bigger wing on the airplane. And Martin's attitude was that he didn't have to do it because he had the contract. And of course, Senator Truman, later President Truman, was a very feisty little gentleman, and he said, well, I can take care of that for you, Mr. Martin. And so they put 6 more foot on it. Well, when they did, they just started hanging more things on it. This airplane, the original model, the C model, had a negative wing incidence of 3.5 degrees. So they, I show you some of the other pictures, you'll see the airplane actually flew like this, which is probably the first of the flying bodies, which we now have as airborne vehicles. As they kept hanging more things on, they put 4 guns on, 2 machine guns on this side, 1 on this side, and some of them had a flexible gun in the nose and a fixed gun in the nose. So as a pilot, I could fire anything from 2 to 5 guns, which were fired by any in the airplane. We had a turret up here, which was our main line of defense. We had 2 guns in it. We had a waist gun on each side back here, and 2 guns in the tail. So we had a lot of guns, and they were all 50 caliber machine guns. But this airplane was a hot rod of the Second War, and the fighters liked this because they could come up and just cruise with us. They didn't have to do S-turning as they did with the heavies or any of the other bombing equipment that we had in the inventory at that time. I'll stop in a minute. I need to organize my thoughts. I have a couple of them I want to tell you about. I met a young man in our outfit who was a pilot. His name was George Belinsky. And George started flying with me, not all the time, but frequently. And he was a little bit younger than I. And we were the only 2 in our squadron that had much engineering knowledge or experience. I had almost 2 years of engineering at the University of Cincinnati, and George had some. And so we come up with some rather unique things that we were doing. For example, when you taxi on the runway in Dijon, if you're taking off, it doesn't matter which way you're taking off, but what they would do is they take the first airplane and put it on the right corner, and the second airplane would taxi across and get on the other corner of the runway. The flagman would drop the flag, and the first aircraft would take off. Before he took off, he was all the way up to military power. It's full 51 inches of mercury and 2,700 RPM. And when the flag's dropped, he releases the brakes and takes off. In 30 seconds, they give you a signal for the next airplane. Well, there's some problems, and one of the problems is when you start down the runway with all that power on, the torque starts to take you off the runway. And the only way you can keep it lined up is to ride the brake. That means you have to put pressure on the right brake. Well, you're counteracting what you're trying to do. You're trying to get the airplane airborne, and you're doing it with the brake on. So what I did, and most frequently I had to go over in the left-hand corner. So what I would do is taxi into position, and if the runway is in this direction, I would canter my airplane like this, and bring the power all the way up, and release when I got the signal for releasing the flag. I let the airplane start to roll. Well, it's going to actually roll out in this direction, but as you do, the torque starts taking effect, bringing you back. Well, I've got the right rudder all the way in, but I don't want to touch the brake if I can avoid it, because it's going to slow me down. And I got 5,000 or 6,000 foot of runway, and this airplane is heavy, and I need all that runway. So by allowing it to actually look like it's going to run off the runway, and the torque takes it around and lines it up, by the time I've got it lined up, I'm beginning to get pressure on my right rudder that I can hold the airplane straight with the rudder without touching the brake. And these are little things that George and I came up with. Well, one day we're flying a mission. We're taking off to the north, and we're going into southern Germany. George is flying, is in the right seat. And we take off. I took the airplane off. And the way you join up, and this airplane, this mission was not a big mission. It was a
Sound off.
Okay.
we have to wait.
Okay.
Oh.
It's okay.
It's okay now.
The way we join up, the lead airplane takes off and will fly north 3 minutes, make a 180-degree turn. The subsequent aircraft, the other 5, would take off at 30-second intervals, and they wouldn't fly out the 3 minutes. They'd turn inside and join up. So by the time the lead airplane comes back to the north edge of the runway, or north edge of the airport, on a southbound heading, we have a 6-ship formation. So we were this day, we were the number 3. We were going to fly the left wing of the lead flight, of the lead airplane. So I got the airplane airborne, got the gear up, the flaps up, retarded the props and the power, got everything cleaned up, and gave it to George, because he's going to be closer to the lead airplane than I am. And this airplane, in the air with a bomb load, you don't want to get less than 150 miles an hour, because it'll quit flying. And when you're flying formation, if I'm over here in this position, I'm going to fly the number 3 position, which is the left-hand wing. As I look across the cockpit, I can only see the lead airplane from the center line out. I can't see the left side of the airplane. George can see the whole airplane, because he's on the right side of the airplane. But I can only see this center line out. That's all I got. So I gave it to George to join it up. And the lead is turned like this, and we're coming around like so. And it looked like we were really tooling up on him, but we were coming up like mad. So George started coming off the power. Now bear in mind, George is not watching instruments. He's just watching that lead airplane. That's all he sees. But I'm sitting there monitoring all of our instruments. And I'm watching the airspeed unwind. And pretty soon it hits 150. That's the danger point. Now we're over downtown Dijon at 1,000 foot, and we're only going 150 miles an hour. So I reached up with my left hand, put it on top of George's hand, started pushing up on the throttles. And he felt my hand, of course, but he didn't know what it was, he didn't know why I was doing it. And he looked over with a glance like that, and as he did, I just tapped the airspeed, and he saw that 150. He knew real quick what was the matter. He got the power on, and went on, flew our, started flying our mission. When we passed through 10,000 feet, we pull out. All airplanes do, it's a standard procedure. We would take our, we had superchargers, so we throw it in the top blowers, the high blowers, and we test all of our armament, test all of our guns. Because if there's any malfunctioning, we have 3 spare aircraft with us, and they'll come in and take care of any airplanes that has to go back, because sick personnel, guns misfiring, any malfunctioning. Because we want to cross into Germany with a full crew, full complement. We don't want any voids. So we rejoined. We're climbing through about 10,000 feet. We're 4 flights of 6 aircraft. That's 24 machines and 4 fighters, 4 P-47s, which are flying top cover. And we've got some stratus up there. It's pretty thick. And the problem the lead flight has is trying to get us through cloud decks or around cloud decks without putting a flight in there because of the potential danger. And he pulled us up into this cloud deck. Now it was thin, you could see hazily outlines of his formation, but and I'll never know why he did it, but he got us into this cloud deck, and then the lead flight turned into us, and we didn't know it, couldn't see him. And I didn't know I was in trouble. I was flying the airplane. I didn't realize I was in trouble until I saw the right wingman of my flight. We were number 2 flight. Here's the lead, and the right wingman, I saw him start down like this, and the gear dropped. The co-pilots, really sharp. By dropping the gear, he lowers his stall speed. And the gear came out, here we are, 11, 12,000 feet, and I see a gear come out, and the airplane's falling out of formation. And with that, I felt George's hand on my hand, and he's pushing up on the throttle. And I did the same, it was the same thing in reverse. I looked over, and I was down to 150 miles an hour and didn't know it. And you don't know it when you're flying the airplane, that's all you know. So what happened is the lead had to make a very sharp turn like this, and he slowed it down because the lead flight out here is turning into us. Ah, it scared me to death. With that, I look out my left side, I'm looking right down at the lead flight, and we're right on top of him. And with that, the 4 P-47s on top, they must have gone in solid instruments. I don't know why they did it. They rolled over and did a split S. One came down like that, the other one came down like this, straight down. We're right on top of Baden-Baden when this happened, just crossing the Rhine River. And I thought, it took me probably 10 minutes to get settled down. We hadn't even gone into Germany yet. We're just crossing the Rhine River. Those are some of the things that can happen to you. One time we were taking off to the south at Dijon, and what they would do in the ground crew, they open up the Bombay's doors at night, and to load this airplane, we got a cable and hoist in the Bombays, so they would use a cable and hoist to raise those bombs up and put them on shackles. And they have a putt-putt, which is an alternate source of power, but sometimes they didn't use that. So when you come down the next day and climb the airplane, you pre-flight it, you can't tell that the battery's down. This airplane had Hamilton Standard electric props on it. And it was not uncommon to get what we call a runaway, which what happens is the generator's putting out current, and instead of going to the battery to charge, but to the prop to operate it, it's being starved by going to the battery to charge it because the battery's charge is down. When that happens, the prop doesn't adjust and it just stays in low pitch. And normally we use a 2700 RPM as a maximum RPM takeoff for military power. But when these things get in flat pitch, they start singing and they'll run up to, go way up. In this case, the right engine ran away and got up to 3,300 before I realized what was happening to me. George just wasn't with it that day, and he didn't catch it. And we have a 3-way switch for each prop. The switch is forward, it's an automatic, bring it up vertically and push it over to the left and it manually will decrease the RPM. So I reached up and got that right switch and pulled it over and got the prop back down to 2700, put it back in fixed and then checked it, pushed it up to automatic and it started working. But this time I'm pretty well to the end of the runway. I'm not sure I'm going to get the airplane off the ground. And I finally got it off. And then the problem was, well, I could keep it in the air or not. And about 1,000 foot south of our runway, there's a canal, and it runs perpendicular to our flight course. And I thought, I don't know, I'm going to put this thing down before the canal or afterwards. I don't think I can keep it in the air. And I kept nursing it, and I got, as I approached the canal, right in line with the runway is a house. And the house is 1.5 story high. I couldn't get over the house. So I used the left rudder and skidded out 50 feet or so to get all out of line of the house. I remember I looked right into the gables as I went past it. Got across the canal, and then there's a woods down there, and I just dragged him through the woods and finally got the airplane to flying. And once I got it flying, I got the flaps up and everything went all right, but it was close. I didn't think we were going to get that one made.
A lot of things that are not technically combat related, but still very
That's right.
hazardous.
Oh, I could tell you, for example, one mission, we never got credit for it as a mission. We took off with 24 airplanes. We lost 2 in takeoff and 1 landing. And the 1 landing was terrible. This airplane had the biggest engine available in the Second World War. It was the Pratt & Whitney R2800, which is a wonderful engine. It's a 2,000 horsepower engine. Now, this is a relatively small airplane. And you have to be very careful on use of the throttles, because when you're shooting an approach coming in to land, you got the throttles retarded. If you come up on the throttles too quickly, and one of the engines does not catch, it'll roll over like this. And it'll do it so fast you can't imagine. And we had a relatively new crew who was shooting the landing to the south, and that's exactly what happened to him. He came up way too fast on his throttles, and the right engine, when the throttles retarded, they can load up with fuel. They actually foul. And this engine didn't come in with the power, and the airplane rolled over like this, down and hit, going straight down. He wasn't over 300 foot when this happened. When that airplane finished, there was nothing from here forward. We lost the whole crew, all 6 of them. Terrible accident. Didn't even get credit for a combat mission. But those things happened to us.
When you got into combat missions, what sort of things confronted you as far as the enemy forces? What was more common, or?
Oh, well, like we had 2 things to worry about from the enemy. One was fighters and one was flak. Flak was devastating. I want to deviate from that because I want to tell you about another combat experience. This was during the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge started on December the 16th, 1944. And the
May
weather,
I, just in case we have some youngsters watching this, can you describe where that took place?
oh, that was up in the Luxembourg areas, north of Dijon. The Germans came through the Ardennes forest, and no one thought they could. And we really didn't think they could mount that kind of force, but they did. And there was a period there of about 6 weeks that we were not sure we were going to be able to stay on the continent. That they were trying to drive through to Antwerp to divide our forces. And so we would take briefings early in the morning, go down and sit, and the weather most of those days was terrible. We had low stratus, But we would go out and sit in our airplanes and wait on the possibility of being able to get off because our ground troops needed our support desperately. We couldn't get off the ground. But we did finally start getting off the ground in, I think it was around the 23rd of December. I remember I flew one mission on the 16th or 17th. And we were up over the Siegfried line. And the Siegfried was made up of, they had truncated sections of concrete to keep tanks from getting through. And again, we were a small mission, 24 airplanes. I was flying my favorite spot, which is the number 2 position of the number 2 flight. Here's the lead flight, the number 2 flight's high on the right, number 3 flight, number 4 flight is low and behind. But if this is the lead of the number 2 flight and I'm the right wing, that's a catbird position because I can see the whole flight in fly formation. Wonderful spot. And I love to fly it. We had a new crew behind us, flying what we call the number 5 position. He's immediately behind me. I could look right out the side and look back and see him. I should explain that one of the things that, one of the reasons I think they gave me the number 2 position is that I flew very tight formation. The way I would fly formation is I would put my prop right over this wing, and the bottom of the blade would clear the top of the wing about 12 feet. And I would look right out the side of my airplane, and I would look right down at that wingtip. That's when I felt I was in a real tight position. That's really snug. And you can do that when you're flying on this position because I can see the whole airplane. Plus I can see all the flight out here. Well, I looked up and I saw a cloud bank that we were going to have to get into it. There's just no way we could get around it. It was cumulus, but our lead could not get around it. He had to take us through it. And so what I did is I got really tight on my lead flight on my lead airplane because I knew I was going to be in restricted visibility. And when I got in there, we were in there for several minutes, and we came out, and I looked back, and number 5 was gone, and we lost him, lost the whole crew. What happens is they get in there and get vertigo, and lose sight of the airplane, and then lose control of the airplane, and lose the whole thing. It's terrible. It happened though, and it happened more often than not.
And again, that was another one of those where you had not entered into combat.
We were still not in combat, that's right. Those things, they happen to us.
I think that's something that's probably kind of overlooked sometimes, you know, from the outsider. You forget all of those events that take place, not necessarily right in the thick of things.
Now, the people who flew the B-26 loved it because its actual combat loss was the lowest of any of our military inventory in the Second War. The combat loss was less than 0.5%. But unfortunately, that does not include the losses from taking off and landing and the other things that happened to us, as I just explained. And Paul wanted me to tell you about an experience that I'll never be able to explain why and how it happened, but I'll tell you what did happen.
I'm sorry, I need to change tapes before you.